The armored frigate Almirante Cochrane was a ship of the Chilean Navy in the late 19th century. She was built, like her twin, the armored frigate Blanco Encalada, in the UK in 1875. She participated in the War of the Pacific, with her most prominent action being her victory over the Peruvian monitor Huáscar in the Angamos naval battle. The Cochrane was part of the forces that defeated President José Manuel Balmaceda in the Chilean Civil War of 1891. Background: in 1871 the President of Chile, Federico Araujo II, initiated a bill in the Chilean Congress to authorize the executive to purchase 2 armored vessels. The bill passed with only 1 opposing vote, and provided for 2 medium-sized ships and that the total cost of the purchase would be 2 million pesos. Construction and operation. The Chilean ambassador to the United Kingdom, Alberto Blescana, was placed in charge of the project. Blescana hired the British ship designer E.J. Reed, a former naval architect to the British Admiralty, as technical advisor. The order was placed at Earl's Shipbuilding Co. in Hull, Yorkshire. The frigates were to be named Almirante Cochrane and Valparaiso. The construction of the Cochrane began in April 1872. The ship was launched and sailed to Chile in 1874, before having been completed, because of fears of a potential conflict with neighboring Argentina and Bolivia. The Cochrane arrived at the port of Valparaiso on December 26, 1874, commanded by Captain Conian, and returned to the UK to be completed in January 1877, after her sister, the Valparaiso, had arrived. In January 1878, once the dispute with Argentina had been settled, President Aníbal Pinto instructed Alberto Blescana to arrange for the sale of the 2 frigates in order to alleviate the economic crisis that had prevailed in Chile for several years. On behalf of Blescana, E.J. Reed offered Cochrane to the UK for the sum of £220,000, but the British declined. Reed then tried to sell the 2 ships to Russia, but again without success. She was then rebuilt in 1897 to 1900 as a gunnery and torpedo training ship. She was scrapped in 1934. Design. Principal dimensions. The Cochrane was 64.0 meters long, with a beam of 14.0 meters and a draft of 6.0 meters. The hull had a maximum displacement of 3,650 t when fully loaded with fuel, fresh water, weapons, ammunition, food and crew. The hull was constructed of iron, held with rivets, and was divided lengthwise into 8 compartments by 7 iron bulkheads. The bow of the Cochrane had, as was customary in the designs of the late 19th century, a sharp spur located 2.0 meters under the waterline and projecting 2.2 meters ahead of the forward perpendicular. She was fitted with a Creuser stern. Armament. The main armament, which was mounted on the central redoubt, was 6 228 mm Armstrong guns divided by 3 mounted heel Scott central pivot, allowing the bow cannon to fire off the sleeve. The centerpiece fired at an angle of 70 degrees and 35 degrees to bow to stern, and the third from the hose to the stern. Supplementing this was a 20-pounder cannon and 1 9 and 1 7-pounders, and an Nordenfeld machine gun installed in the COFA's ratchet, 1-inch caliber, which fired a 1-pound projectile. The Cochrane also had a steamboat which was equipped with a torpedo on a bowsprit. The only time this boat was used was on the expedition to Callao, where it was used to try to sink Peruvian ships. Armor. The ship was protected under the waterline by an armored belt which stretched from around 1.2 meters under the waterline up to the battery cover. The maximum thickness was 230 mm at the waterline, the center of the ship, and 115 mm at the bow and stern. The hull and armor plating were separated by a layer of teak 254 mm thick to reduce the impact of hits. The battery cover, which was flush with the armored belt, was protected by a 76 mm armor in the center of the ship, reducing to 50 mm at the bow and stern. The battery, which had a height of between 2 and 2.5 meters, was protected in bands and on the front face by two plates, the lower one 203 mm and the top one 152 mm thick. The back of the battery was protected by armor plating 115 mm thick. Like the armor of the hull, this was bolted to a metal structure with an inner lining of teak 304 to 355 mm thick. Propulsion: Cochrane was fitted with both steam and sail propulsion, being rigged as a barkentine. The power plant, provided by the company Jean-Pen and Amp Sons, consisted of two compound steam engines, 6 boilers and 2 propellers. The machines had 2 horizontal cylinders, one high and one low pressure. The high-pressure cylinder had a diameter of 1.16 meters, while the low-pressure cylinder had a diameter of 1.93 meters. The race was 2 cylinders of 762 millimeters. The machines were capable of a maximum total output of 1.23 megawatts, providing 90 revolutions per minute. These two machines spanned propeller blades of 4 to 4.8 meters in diameter and 4.72 meters of weight. The steam was supplied by 6 cylindrical tube boilers with a maximum working pressure of 413.6 kilopascals. The total area of 836.12 square meters of heating area. This propulsion system allowed the Cochrane, during tests over a measured mile, a top speed of 12.8 knots. However, the maximum operating speed was 12 knots. At this speed, fuel consumption was 45 tons of coal per day, with consumption of 35 tons per day at the reduced speed of 10 knots. Military operations. War of the Pacific. The Cochrane participated in the War of the Pacific, most prominently being taking part in the defeat and capture of Peruvian monitor Huáscar in the naval battle of Angamos on October 8, 1879. At the start of the war, the Cochrane was commanded by Captain Enrique Baeza Simpson, and since April 5 was present at the blockade of Iquique. At the end of June 1879, the Cochrane was the flagship of the 2nd Naval Division, in charge of the blockade of Iquique with the gunboat Magellan, the corvette Abetao and the Maestas Cusano. On July 16, the Cochrane and Maestas Cusano were relieved by the Blanco Encalada and Lamart respectively, and withdrew to Antofagasta. In August 1879, the Cochrane sailed to Valparaiso and underwent maintenance for the next month. Captain Juan José Latour then took command. Latour was also head of the 2nd Naval Division, which also consisted of the Low and O'Higgins. Cochrane then went on to participate in the decisive naval battle of Angamos. The Cochrane was also present in 1880 when the Peruvian corvette Union broke the blockade of Arica. During the 1891 Chilean Civil War, Cochrane was part of the forces that defeated President José Manuel Balmaceda. At dusk on January 7, 1891, the Cochrane towed the Huáscar, which had her machines dismantled, for the Bay of Valparaiso to Las Salinas, where the Huáscar was prepared for service. On August 23, 1891, she participated in the battle against the forces at Valparaiso, along with the Esmeralda and under the command of George Montt. The Cochrane took between 10 and 12 hits, whilst the Esmeralda took between 6 and 8. Commanders of the Cochrane.